My name is Chantal, and I am a business analyst with the MedSIS program, and I will be helping programs get up and running to the CBME module for their July 1 launch. These are the things I wanted to go through today. Implementing your Royal College assessment plan, the plan for CBME module and mobile, the assessment form workflow, so when your trainees and supervisors are triggering those EPA forms. I'll show you the MedSIS dashboard where you're going to be tracking your trainees' individual progress. And then I have a quick snapshot of where your specific program is at in the process of, receiving your files from Royal College all the way to getting forms triggered between your trainees and supervisors. So the process for actually getting your Royal College assessment plan is that your specialty committee came up with your EPAs and requirements, and those are in a PDF document. The IT department at Royal College then converts that into a large Excel file, makes it available to the university. Our team then imports that document, and we go through each of your EPAs and we create all of the requirements that the trainee has to do in order to achieve that EPA. So, collect 5 observations of achievement. 2 of those must be in a particular setting, and 1 of those must be with a particular patient demographic. We create those requirements, which then in turn flow into that individual trainee dashboard, and then you can then track when the trainee gets forms completed on those particular requirements. Once I go through that document and create all the requirements, I make a bunch of notes and questions and things like that, and I set up a meeting with the program director, program administrator, and CBD lead. And we run through all of this information, clear some things up, I make adjustments as required, and then I also outline kind of, next steps that are going to happen with your particular program. I'll show you what your actual dashboard looks like for one of your trainees and what your EPAs look like, and then let you know what the follow-up to that will be, which would be like training for your program administrator and so on. So the strategy for the MedSIS implementation is train the trainer. And so we would like to offer you the tools that you need in order to get your residents and faculty up and running. And we will do this via some in-person training sessions for your key faculty members in your program, as well as some online resources. And that will be quick user guides with screenshots or videos and things like that, which will be posted on our website. We're also planning to have programs be able to trigger EPAs prior to their official CBD cohort beginning. So in April or May, we're hoping that you can start triggering forms for your upper year residents. The in-person training sessions will consist of the introduction session that I'm giving today, as well as a session in our computer lab located in Mumsy. And we'll have program directors, administrators, all of these key folks here actually come into the computer lab, log into their own MedSIS account, and pull up their own trainees. And if we do this in sort of June, July, then hopefully if your program has been triggering some forms since April or May, there'll be a bit of data in there. And so you'll be able to kind of look at the dashboard in a more comprehensive way and see some data in there and how that tracking actually happens.
So just on that issue, since we were dealing with this last night, if all of the competency committee members wanted to participate, would they be allowed?
In the training?
Yeah, and how to use dashboard, because our competency committee members are going to be accessing this for the purpose of their reviews. Are they, if they wanted to do this?
Yep. Would
it be accessible?
Yep. Absolutely. So we'll send out, some links with some dates that we're going to hold training, and they would sign up for one of those sessions.
And if a whole committee said they wanted to do it together, because we have 12 people, would you do a session for that committee?
I wouldn't do a session specific to a programs committee, because there's like 16 programs coming online. But you could invite all of your committee members to a particular training session. we'll send out the links and everybody would just sign up accordingly. If you all wanted to be at the same session, then I would maybe have your program administrator or somebody sign everybody up for the same session.
Do you have capacity to do like remotely? Or you have the capacity to do that? We have some people who are in like Niagara.
We don't have the capacity to do it.
She goes right into the.
It's in like a
MedSIS
computer
program.
lab, and so everybody will be sitting at their computer and I'm kind of walking everybody through step by step.
How big is the lab? How many people can you accommodate?
I wanna say like 20.
But so they can't access into the system when you're on that part, like when you're presenting, say via Zoom or something, can they go into the system with
exactly.
access?
That's what I mean. They may not be there with you, obviously, to walk around with them, but can they see what you're doing on a demonstration screen or something?
You
That'd be
could,
great,
I mean, yeah, if we wanna set that up, we can. If people are
We
gonna
can
feel it's
try
a
to
good
see
use
if
of
we
their
can
time, we
make
can
it
I think
see.
even if they watch you as you go along, it should. Can I just ask you too, you guys said your upper years?
Pardon?
Because you guys said just now that.
Your upper year trainees.
So they'll be entered into the MedSIS platform?
The hope is that your program administrator, your program would register some or all of your upper year trainees, at least for the period of time of, April, May, June, so that they can begin triggering those forms and that your faculty can start completing them, so that when your official cohort starts July 1, that it's not like the first time
Sure.
that they've
But
seen it.
the upper years will continue on past July 1?
If you choose so. So some programs have not chosen and some programs
So we
have.
can put them all in?
As supervisor.
As
No, no, no.
supervisors?
No,
No,
as
Well,
trainees.
they're training, right,
As
trainees,
trainees.
registered as trainees to
That's-
do
For your practice, how are you gonna register them?
So
training.
If I put a PGY4 in during this practice period, they'll be registered as a trainee.
they're already in MedSIS, so you're just putting the trainee into the learning path. So
But they
whoever
will
you
have access,
decide
but they'll
is
have
in a learning path will then be in a learning path,
But
whether
they'll
it's a
they'll have
first year or
access-
fifth year.
They'll have access to all the EPAs.
Exactly,
They can do that for the rest of their training.
exactly,
With the dashboards. and-
exactly.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So I can put all my, because we're starting, so I can put all my PGY2s to 5 into the system, and they can use these tools as we go forward,
Absolutely.
because we were told they couldn't, so that's
You,
it.
they would be considered like unofficial, they would be
Sure.
registered as unofficial trainees, but that doesn't have anything to do with the access level or forms that they can complete or dashboard or anything like that.
So they're not using the system and triggering EPAs and are active as your first cohort is. They're just being entered into the system.
No,
at this time,
no,
right?
they're
I want them-
active.
I want
So
them
your-
active.
all of your
There's no point in having them.
You want to launch all years at the same time.
Yeah,
Well, our goal is to use these tools and switch our current WBA tools over to
they're
the.
not Royal College CBD, but we want them to be able to trigger all the same
Yeah,
EPAs.
so there'll be
Same
no difference.
Tools,
Okay.
right, so that's less confusing for
Yeah.
faculty, right? Faculty will only have
It's
one
pretty,
set of
yeah.
tools to be familiar with.
Exactly.
Yep.
But we were told there was a barrier to doing that. If you're telling me there's not, that's a big plus.
No, so there'll be no difference then between your PGY1 and your PGY5, except the stage that you register them in. So your first years will likely be in stage 1 and your upper years, whichever,
We're gonna
it doesn't
figure that
matter.
part out.
So is this strictly for those specialties that are actually launching July 1 this year, or
Yeah.
can it be used for people starting next year?
Only those that are launching this year.
Right.
Because we don't have any EPA, we don't have your Royal College file. It has to be an official file that's given to us from the Royal College to like create the learning path for your trainees to be registered in.
They're actually still working on them. And they come typically by the end of the year. So they promised them by December for all 13 launching this year, and they were in.
But they're not in terms of MedSIS. So I actually won't receive several of the programs until the end of March or even beginning of April. So for those folks, they definitely won't be able to trigger until like mid to end of April, even into May, where some of the files I received in, beginning of January or even back to mid-December. So there is quite a lengthy period of time that, these files are just, trickling in as they get approved and translated to French and so on and so forth at the Royal College level.
For technical files, but the PDFs you'll be able to see your entire Canada document.
MedSys work.
But in MedSIS, you
To
won't be
make it
able to
work,
start
you've
till
got to
this
have an
time.
electronic transfer.
Because we're
Yeah.
just thinking about what our soft launch would look like from July 1.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't be able to use MedSIS here.
MedSys
Some programs have decided to, as a soft launch, to use like the WBA assessment tool that already exists in MedSIS. And what they've done is that when they get their first draft of EPAs, they can pick a few like common EPAs. So like maybe like 3 to 5 of your EPAs, we create those as a WBA assessment, and those can be triggered and completed. But there's like no dashboard, there's no tracking. But if you're just trying to get in the mode of trainee triggering form, faculty completing form, how do you fill out an EPA assessment form, things like that, then that we can do as an interim, which, you know, I would suggest doing if you're not officially launching for another year or two.
But it's practice only, that's not retroactively entered into the system.
Yeah, it won't then feed into the dashboard, but at least you'll have like quite a bit of time to get that practice in.
Yeah.
Because they created 9 tools or something that are very useful for people that were created for non-CBD that exist.
In MedSIS.
And you're just saying you could customize those. So
Exactly. So on our MedSIS website, we have all of our training resources, not just for the CBME module, but for all of our modules. And so we have them organized by audience, and you can see this is an example. We're on the learner screen, and it has the user documents and then also the videos that are available. The videos that are on there right now are like, how do I log into my MedSIS mobile? How do I trigger a form? If I'm a supervisor, how do I complete a form? So for programs that are going to be launching and beginning to trigger forms in the CBME module, then I would suggest trying to get some of this information out to your faculty so that when, you know, the time comes where we say, okay, your program's up and running and you can start triggering, it's nobody's very first time pulling out their phone or like ever seeing what this looks like. So if you can kind of disseminate or at your like program meetings and things like that, kind of get these discussions happening or be able to pull up a video on your screen while you're in your meeting, it just helps get everybody a little bit more familiarized with the process. And then again, as I mentioned, the early mobile launch, so the exact timing will vary on when we're getting your file from the Royal College and like going through this entire process. I will always be the person initiating meetings and initiating what the next steps are and letting your program know what they need to do next and the time frame around that. But we are hoping to have everybody up and running the latest by May. So they'll at least have like May and June as like practice. What I will say is that last year when we did the launch, because MedSIS was new and it was empty and nothing ever existed, we had about a 4 to 6 week period of time where programs could go in and trigger forms, and they were true test forms. So you could score anything, you could type anything in the comments. It didn't matter because at the end of the period, we wiped the entire system. And then when July 1 started, these were now official CBME forms that folks were triggering. The difference this year is that nothing is getting deleted. So if you do choose to have your upper years triggering forms and things like that, it's just something to think about, you know, maybe you want to make these like real encounters and real assessments because those forms will then stick to the trainee in their evaluation portfolio and they will always exist. So if you're willy-nilly triggering test forms, it might not be entirely fair to the resident to have them then be attached to them permanently. We have some training for the program administrators, and it's kind of in 2 parts. The first part is through user documentation, and these are just the quick steps that are required in order to get your program up and running. So, you know, like creating your competence committee and assigning academic coaches, registering your trainees into their learning plan. And I will follow up with the program administrators directly with these quick steps and give them a time frame as to when to complete them, and I can walk them through that, but they are very simple. And then the second part will be the computer lab, more in depth, going through the dashboard and how to use the dashboard effectively and pull reports and things like that.
So for, number 3, assigning trainees to academic coaches. So is this just to create the access for those individuals into MedSIS?
Yeah.
So theoretically, we're not going to use academic coaches, we don't have enough faculty, but our competency committee reviewers, that would be their pathway, right?
Exactly. So your program administrator would say, my competency committee is called ABC, these are my faculty and so on and so forth that are on it.
And
They
these
would-
are the residents that are assigned to them?
Exactly,
Rather than every member would have access to the whole thing?
exactly.
Just the chair, so are there different levels of access? So for a coach or competency committee reviewer, that would be just the residents they're seeing, or would they be able to have access to all residents, or is that only for program director and competency committee chair?
So program director and program administrator have access to all trainees off the hop regardless. And then once the competence committee is created, the committee itself has to be assigned to the residents they should be reviewing. So we have some large programs who will have more than one competence committee. Like family medicine, they're distributed. So they'll likely have like 8 to 10 competence committees. And so they can create all of those, and then they will take this committee and assign it to these 10 residents, and this committee and assign it to these 10 residents. So they're only viewing those people.
Sure, but if one committee has 45 residents, will every committee member have access to all 45?
If you assign that committee to all 45 residents.
But we could assign Dr. Yang to residents XYZ, and
Yeah.
he would see XYZ.
Exactly,
And we could assign the chair, which is Dr. Yang, to all 45.
exactly. So I wanted to talk about the EPA assessment workflow, and so this is triggering the EPA form. And so we have a current solution, and then we have an improved solution. The improved solution is only launching July 1. So if your program decides they want to be triggering forms in, April, May, June, they'll be using the solution that we currently have, and then that solution will change, for July 1 when your official cohort begins. So the first workflow will stay the same. Supervisor can trigger form, complete form and submit it, and this can be done on a mobile or on a desktop, doesn't matter. Second workflow is that the trainee initiates the form. They can fill out parts of the form or none of the form, and the reason for that is that a lot of the forms have various drop downs and contextual variables to fill out. Like I was mentioning earlier, like what is the setting, what is the procedure, what was the patient demographic, these types of things. And then there's a box for like additional context around the encounter. And so the idea is that the trainee would do that part and fill that section in, and they would then email the form to the supervisor who would have that part already populated, and they would fill out the assessment component of the form.
So the current way that works is the supervisor opens the email and has the form. They don't have to log back into MedSIS. Right?
Exactly. So they would receive an instant email notification with a link directly to the form.
Do it on mobile.
Yeah, no, I got it.
Yeah. And then, it's the same workflow, but different way of doing it is that the trainee initiates the form, passes their device over to the supervisor, and they complete the rest of the form, but they're still clicking that send to evaluator button because, the mobile doesn't know like who's clicking what when you're passing the device. And so they would still get that instant email notification with a link to the form and do the final submission. So with that,
when you hit that, that's not going to MedSIS, and they can't send it directly to MedSIS off the learner's phone.
exactly, that's the current process. What was happening with that process and what we experienced is that the trainee is triggering the phone, passing over the device. The supervisor is thinking, I've done it, so I'm submitting it. They get the instant email notification and they think, I already submitted that, we're good to go. But the form is considered like in progress still until they do that final submission. And now if anybody's aware of the new expiry policy, these forms are expiring after 10 days. And so we were losing some of the forms that were technically completed but never officially submitted.
So the process is different than the undergrad process.
Yes, and so we're changing that for July 1. And so the process will be the same as undergrad, where you can pass your mobile device over to your supervisor. They will complete the form, and there will be a disclaimer at the bottom of the form that will say, you know, I am the supervisor completing this form. If that is not checked off, then the only option will be to email the form to the supervisor. If it is checked off, because I am the supervisor and I did complete this, you can submit the form directly from the trainee's mobile device. If that is done, then the supervisor will receive an immediate follow-up email to say an assessment form was completed under your name, the form is attached. If you did not actually complete this form, please contact ABC. So it will be a little bit of an easier, like a one-step process,
Yeah, that's the undergrad process.
Yeah.
So why do you have to click the disclaimer?
Because in the undergrad process, what happens is the trainee actually triggers a faculty evaluation first and completes it. And by submission of the faculty evaluation, it actually says, please click this button to pass your device over to your supervisor now. It logs out of their account, logs into the supervisor's account, and the supervisor is actually completing the form from their own MedSIS account. Where in this, the forms are being submitted from the trainee account.
I didn't know that happened because
seamless.
students always have like their laptop.
Yeah.
And then they turn it to me.
Yeah, okay.
Because they're completing your faculty evaluation.
Yes.
So they don't want you to see it, yeah.
I didn't actually realize that was happening.
Yeah.
Sneaky students.
Okay, so until July 1 in the practice time, we're only sending it to ourselves.
Yeah, there'll always be that
And-
email link to
And
click.
we have to respond to the email to actually get it to MedSIS.
Yeah.
Okay, and after July 1, we won't have to do that. We'll just get the confirmation email that says, if you didn't do this, call us.
Call someone, yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
but there's that added step.
So I'll show you the MedSIS mobile. So this is what the view, I logged in as a trainee, and I'm gonna go through the process as a trainee initiating the form. It looks exactly the same for a supervisor. The only change is that if I'm a trainee, then I'm picking who the supervisor is. If I'm the supervisor, then I'm picking who the trainee is that I'm assessing. So if you click on evaluations, it's just gonna show you a long list of all the evaluations, either pending your attention or evaluations that you have completed. And there's filters on there, so if you wanna filter only on pending, you'll be able to see those. A couple of enhancements that we've made that are very new that we haven't even actually emailed the programs about yet is that all of our forms are now mobile, so you can complete ITERs on your mobile device or WBAs on your mobile device. Also, if the trainee triggers an on-demand form, like a WBA or an on-demand ITER, an email link will be sent right away, where before the emails only went out on a Wednesday and Friday. The other thing is that when you do receive a reminder on a Wednesday or Friday to say that you have some pending evaluations in MedSIS, it will now recognize when you click that link if you are on a mobile device or if you are on a desktop computer. So trainees will be able to trigger all types of forms on their mobile, and supervisors will be able to complete all types of forms. Except procedure logs. I don't know if anybody's using the activity log in MedSIS. If I go to trigger a new form, it's going to ask me what type of form I want to trigger, and in this case, I'm going to choose a CBME evaluation. The learning path will be, if you only have one learning path, it will automatically populate, but for folks in like surgical foundations, they'll have two learning paths. They'll have surgical foundations in their home program, and the trainee will have to indicate, am I doing surgical foundations EPAs or am I doing obstetrical EPAs? And so they'll pick the appropriate learning path. They're going to have to pick the current rotation that they're on. They'll select the EPA. Also, we have a functionality in MedSIS that will allow programs to map an EPA to a rotation. And what that does is, if the resident is on a rotation where there's a couple of EPAs that they are likely to see, if those EPAs are mapped to that rotation, they'll appear at the top of the list. So I'm going to choose this EPA and choose the supervisor. We also have an enhancement that allows the trainee to add a supervisor on the fly. So if they're not already in MedSIS, they can add their name and their email address and continue on with the process. This is our test system, so it runs a little bit slower than our actual system. When you're going in and triggering these forms, the process is fairly quick when you're triggering and completing the forms. So at the top, it's going to show you the contextual variables, and these are the various drop downs that the trainee will likely fill out.
Just going back, because one of the things we've had issue with is in identification of the supervisor, is it limited to name and email address?
It has first name, last name, CPSO, and email address.
Okay, but a nurse may not have CPSO or
It's not a mandatory field, so you can add
we can't
nurse.
Yeah, so the biggest issue is we can't tell, and especially where we have rules about diversity of preceptors. Is there any thought to how you're going to deal with that issue? If we say you got to have 4 faculty, our reviewers aren't able to tell who's a resident, who's a faculty.
If the EPA requires a diverse, you have to have a nurse, you have to have this, the form will collect that information. So one of these drop downs will be what is the role of the supervisor that is completing this form.
Okay, so if we build that in, if we say one of our EPAs says minimum of 3 different evaluators, 50% faculty, 50% other, we'll be able to tell that it's a faculty MD, not a senior resident MD.
Exactly.
Yeah, just on that topic, because I was thinking about this. So for foundations, for instance, that are producing the files, and some of the EPAs do have stipulations like direct, indirect, faculty versus that. But it's not showing up, like for instance, I can't find something on the actual evaluation forms, let alone the dashboard, that says direct versus indirect. Like, is that in there somehow?
It's whatever is outlined by the Royal College. So it might say you have to have a variety, in the description, we have a variety of direct or indirect observations, but if there's no actual requirement outlined by the college that you have to have at least 1 direct and at least 1 indirect, and that information is not collected on the form, it wouldn't be there. But there are several EPAs that say, out of these observations, 2 need to be direct. Out of these observations, you need to have 5 different evaluators.
I haven't looked at the EPAs for foundation really closely, so maybe
You have that in.
I'm not seeing it, but.
No, it says that's in the description of the EPA, that we're not seeing it translated into the form.
Because sometimes it's in the description, but it's not a hard requirement that they have outlined. So it doesn't, there's no minimum number attached to.
So I haven't looked at the foundations EPAs closely. I have looked at the general surgery EPAs closely, and you're right, they almost all of them have these hard ones, right?
Yeah.
5 of them, like at least 2 faculty, at least 2 direct or whatever. So those will be reflected in the forms themselves, and it'll come up, because that's the other thing, when the reviewers are kind of looking, how when they see the dashboard, is there any way that can just be, I don't know, this would be a big change for the platform, but to just show that very readily, whether or not in the learner report that gets generated or something, I don't know.
It's on the dashboard, so if there is a requirement that you have to have at least 3 different observers, that will be a requirement and it will have a percentage, and only when they actually get 3 different observers and are assessed as a level 5 out of 5, will that progress. And if it says you have to have a psychiatrist, you have to have a nurse, and you have to have another attending physician, then only when they've selected the role, okay, this is my nurse one, this is my psychiatrist one, will those progress bars
show in the contextual variables that they have to.
Yes, but there are many that say, like I just went through the psychiatry program, and every single EPA had a hard requirement of at least 1 psychiatrist, at least 1 geriatric psychiatrist or something like that, but the form was not collecting the data. So I go to create this requirement so it shows up in the dashboard, but there's nowhere for the resident to say if you're a psychiatrist. In those instances, I go back to the program and I say, listen, this is what the requirements are saying, the form is not currently collecting that information, do you want me to add this so that, you have these requirements?
If we pick up on stuff like that, is that pretty easy for you guys to add?
Yeah,
It
and
has
those
to
are
be-
things I try to pick up on,
Yeah.
but only when there's a discrepancy. So
Okay.
if it says it in your description that you need to have,
Yeah.
these types of people fill out the forms,
Yeah.
but there's no requirement, I won't go looking
Of
to
course,
make a
yeah, but
requirement.
it's a hard requirement, and it has to be a drop down too. If it's not a drop down,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna do that. It can't be a
exactly.
fill-in ad
So-
hoc. They're not-
Exactly.
So for MD, you could subcategorize it to say MD supervisor, or faculty, MD resident, or other?
Yeah, and a lot of them are actually like core resident or transition to practice resident is required to fill out the form. So
you
it's
can be that
whatever.
specific, you can have 3 or 4 tick boxes on the.
Yeah, some of them have like 7. I mean, the
Okay,
more
great.
options you put, the more daunting it is for someone to go in and be clicking around. So we try and just make the options specific to who would ever supervise a resident on this particular EPA.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right.
So when there is a hard requirement and the form is not collecting the data, this is not just for the role of the supervisor, it's for any requirement,
Yeah.
because logically, when I go in and create these logical statements in the back end, I need to connect these pieces together. And so it might say you need 3 patients that are under 10 years old, but there's either nowhere to put an age, or the age is like a free text and the system can't calculate based on texting. So then we convert it from a free text to a drop down with incremental ages. So now we can connect the dots.
Yeah.
Age won't be the issue, I think. Question is whether, to think about is whether allied health, if we think about our APAs, whether allied health is a group
Yeah.
rather than RN, respiratory tech, social worker. like
And it could
this.
be different for each EPA. So there's some that say group it as allied health, and then there are some that's like a charge nurse or a certain type of manager that specifically needs to do it. So we can be flexible.
When we do that, do we have a sit-down session with you, or is it gonna be by email, or?
It will be a sit down, and those meetings are fairly long,
Yes.
because
Especially if you got.
there's lots of like little
Especially if you got
discrepancies or
45
questions that
EPAs.
I'm going to have in interpreting
Okay,
what all of
great.
these requirements
Just so we
are.
know what to prepare for.
Yeah.
Well, you're just going off the Royal College PDF anyways, right? Like the Royal College already has all the requirements.
They do, but they'll ask questions like, you must do an emergency procedure, and then there's a list of 30 procedures or 20 procedures, and I don't know which are the emergency procedures. It just has a big list of procedures. So for me, I have to say, okay, out of this list of 20, what do you consider an emergency procedure?
That's not really well designed, but.
Well, and everybody
Well-
wrote their own, so each
Yeah.
specialty committee
And
has their own
ours are
way.
straightforward, because
Yeah.
it says,
Yeah,
prepare a patient for surgery, and we've got
yeah, that's fine.
emergent versus
Yeah, we'll
planned
have a look.
surgery, so
Yeah,
that's an easy sort of algorithm, right?
Yep.
But the point is, good news is I'm hearing, which is good news to us, is that we can sit down with you and make those specific for our needs. So if we look at the EPAs and say, what are we gonna need for our competency committee members to be able to determine if the requirements are met?
Exactly. And there's also
Rather than
things,
just relying on MedSIS turning green.
yeah,
It's about, because turning green is an absolute Royal College requirement. You have options to promote based on whether you get green or not, which is not a binary thing.
exactly.
We want the other information, that's gonna be more important than whether the end thing turns green or not. It's
Yeah,
complicated.
and there's requirements that are in there that say a good mix of these procedures. Well, I can't make a logical statement
Yeah.
out of a good mix, right? So you need to either tell me it has to be 3 different procedures, or there's procedures in there where you're like, okay, well, this one, they've got to see at least 7, but this one, we're not concerned about because it's rare, right? And we actually go and break down those numbers when
didn't
those
do
things
that.
come up.
I think you guys were smarter than that. Anyway, we'll see. Well, that just gives us, that's the prep work we should do before we meet with you, right?
So typically, I mean, if you want to take the initiative and do that, great. But what I do is like I'm going through each individual statement, and where I see a discrepancy or have a question or something doesn't quite
We'll
line
give it some
up,
thought too.
then I'll bring that
Or
forward.
a PDF, obviously.
Well, we have the
I'll know.
EPAs, we have all that.
Okay. Okay, so if I go back to this form, once you fill out all your drop downs, the very first scale is your overall, and that's your entrustment scale. And based on what you pick, the descriptor will show up underneath. And there's also an info button where a little legend will come up with the descriptors. I don't know if you want to say your piece about updating the descriptors for these.
Yeah, we've been doing
Number
some
5.
work trying to address the issues of the 4-5 rating and looking at every opportunity. And beyond FacDev is actually, can we change the verbiage on the anchor, because it seems to be so problematic, and we have. So I found some options from the Royal College with extended explanation that we tabled at implementation, then we tweaked them a little bit more, and then they went out to large programs and to residents, faculty for feedback. All came back extremely positive. They liked the change in the anchor. Some suggested it might make a significant improvement to scoring, which will be an interesting to see. And so we'll actually change those anchors once approved by exec to in the form inside MedSIS prior to July.
Okay. That's what we saw Wednesday, right? Yeah. So we were in
They're
favor.
circulating? Yeah.
So then you can assess your milestones, and the scales are going to work very much the same. They have a little info button to show you what the scale is, and you would walk through and click all of these off. You're going to give your final feedback to the resident, and when we have the new functionality, this is where you're going to see at the bottom like a box with a disclaimer to say, I'm the supervisor that is completing this form. So if that box is not checked off, then their options are going to only be like to email to the evaluator. But if they do have the box checked off, then it would just be like submit. And so the process would be done. Is there any questions about the mobile or the EPA forms?
Only, well, we'll have that discussion because we're meeting with Lisa tomorrow. We want some additional forms, and so it's forms beyond EPA forms.
Right, so the forms that are assigned by the Royal College for the
I got
EPAs,
it.
those will be like in the dashboard, but if you have other, you know, like you want to do your procedure logs or other WBA assessment forms, then we can definitely get those in there too.
Did you submit it?
No, I'm meeting with you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Fill in as we do it. We've got our order of prioritization.
I can,
Yeah, well, that was the purpose of this meeting. I know you've got everything, but that's my prime purpose.
yeah.
So oh, come on. Let's start over here. Stop it. Let's do this. Okay. So this is what you're going to see, and this display screen and the, you know, from computer to here kind of squinches everything together, but it's much more spaced out and better looking when you actually look at it on your regular computer. But once all of your trainees are registered into their learning path, and you'll see all of them here, it's program specific. So if you're internal medicine, you're only going to see your internal medicine trainees. It will tell you their training level, their stage, when they started that particular stage, and their stage progress. And the progress is calculated based on the percentage of EPAs that they have achieved so far. And then the overall status is manually assigned by the program. So your trainee will not flip overall status based on, you know, how much they have done in this particular stage so far.
Just back to the thought I had. So we have a unique situation because our distributed campus, we have a regional educational lead whose primary responsibility is the residents out in Niagara, but we have overall responsibility, and we're only going to have one competency committee. So we could be sure that when Katie enters them, they should all be entered under the one. Shouldn't have separate ones for McMaster General Surgery Niagara and McMaster General Surgery Hamilton.
Correct. It would just be general surgery and everybody would be registered.
And then for her purposes, the Regional Educational League could we could create access to her for either everybody or just the Niagara residents for her on-site purposes, because these will be used by more than competency committee.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just have to think about how to structure that first for staff.
So you can see here in the blue, we have the stage, and within it we have the EPAs, and this particular EPA has a part A and a part B to it, and within the EPA part are those requirements. And so these are the requirements that I'm creating in the back end. And as the resident is triggering these forms, getting them completed, getting the 5 out of 5 on them, will they move? So you just saw me complete a form, and so if I indicated that, okay, I'm doing an appendix on the drop-down contextual variables, and then I was assessed by my supervisor as a 5 out of 5, this is gonna move to 100%. The percentages are going to roll up, the requirement percentages roll up into the EPA. The EPA parts roll up into the overall EPA, and then the overall EPAs roll up into the stage, if that makes sense.
So is there an option to manually change it to competent if a competency committee decides, even though technically they're short one evaluation or something?
Yeah.
So that can be manually overridden.
Well,
Yeah.
we would have seen that IOE do that.
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
they have the Royal College one still, they
Yeah.
so they have to manually.
Yeah, it's just that MedSIS, be sure MedSIS is allowing that, that's great.
And so, you're gonna see the breakdown of the, the number of forms that have been triggered, and then the breakdown of the entrustment scale. So, out of these 9 forms, she's got 1 as a 3 out of 5, 3 as a 4 out of 5, and 5 as a 5 out of 5.
So does attempts mean completed forms or triggered forms?
Completed forms.
So is there gonna be triggered forms?
The triggered forms won't show up in here because it will not contribute towards anything that's in the
Will
dashboard.
we be able to see that somewhere?
The pen,
So resident X triggered 36 forms, she's got in total 15 completed.
Yeah.
21 expired.
yes, you will be able to see, and the other assessments, I don't know if expired shows up.
Because that's a
Just
key.
disappear.
That's
Yeah.
a key thing that we've asked for,
Have to
and
re-trigger.
are you guys, well, no, it's not about re-getting the form, but part of a competency committee's job is to say what effort is the resident making.
Yeah.
And it also points competency committees about faculty issues that need to be addressed, but you have to know that.
Yes.
There's a difference between a resident who triggers 3 and has 2, and a resident who triggers 17 and has 2.
Yes.
In terms of what a competency committee might decide when it's a border, when they haven't quite finished all their, so are we gonna be able to see that somewhere?
Yeah, so right now, just because expiry is fairly new, we have the other statuses pulled in, so you can see pending and in progress, but I don't think expired evaluations have been pulled in because it's
Because Mainport had that, right?
yeah, and you can see it in the evaluation schedule. It can then be a lot of information for the committee to look at, a long list of expired
But that actually
forms.
is critical information.
Yeah, so I'm sure it will be brought in. All of the other statuses of all of the other forms are pulled in. Expired forms are not I don't think they're currently pulled into this module right now.
Is there a plan to do that?
Yeah, I would assume so. We would typically pull in all forms. Yeah. They might not be in your face when you click on other assessments, but there will be a way to look at them.
It'd be good too if I could just piggyback on that to, like from the program level, I see the program director or CBME, the chair wants to rank all the faculties by outstanding or incomplete assessments? Is there a way
Yes.
to do that?
We have a mechanism to do that, so you can export from the evaluation schedule.
Yeah.
You can like filter your dashboard on all expired forms and export it, and then you'll be able to see who your main people are that continuously have expired forms. And then an email just went out on like even like how to create a quick pivot table versus like to show you forms, the number of forms sent to me versus the number of forms I have completed, because someone might have, two people might each have 2 expired forms, but one person was only ever sent 2 forms and one person was sent 100 forms. And in the grand scheme of things, 2 forms is not really a big deal, right?
Well, it's a big deal because it raises 2 different questions. One is, did they refuse to accommodate a form? The resident asked them and they said, get lost, I don't do this, because we've had faculty actually say that I know you, right? We actually had in our foundations committee, we had a faculty write in the contextual box, I don't do this. So I've ticked, he ticked the global scale and nothing else, says, I don't do this. So you can imagine where that led, appropriately led, because it should, but that's the point. So if we're going to run this and make it work and say that this is a shared commitment between faculty and residents, we've got to be able to evaluate the faculty on that.
Yeah.
We have to be able to evaluate the residents on the effort they're making. And when they're making no effort, that's on them. And when they're making a lot of effort and not getting success, then that's on the faculty. And to run this program, we need to be able to do both.
Yeah.
So you can show us how to create the reports if we think about the reports we want.
Yeah, it's already there. It's a new
Yeah, it's
feature since expired forms came out. Immediately after it got turned on, we got a million emails that said, how am I supposed to find out how many forms each of my supervisors has expired? And so we quickly, got our programmers to come up with an export of the evaluation dashboard. And then one of the girls in our office just came up with a 1-pager on like, how can I export this and create a pivot table to show me this data in a meaningful way? And that email just went out within the last week or so you can follow up with your program administrator and just say, have you received an email from MedSIS that explains how to get an export from the evaluation dashboard where I can see who has expired evals and how many.
Theoretically, we could produce that same report for the learners.
Yes. Yeah.
We could, rather than it showing up in the dashboard, we could say, okay, but for competency committee, we want a report that says resident triggered X, Z were completed.
Yes.
Well, the EPA summary, right?
Yeah, I mean,
It's just flipping it in the other way, I guess.
well, it's because you don't show how many they asked for, else you show are completed here.
Yes.
Right? Completed and then what grade they got on them.
Yeah.
Right? It's this metric of how many did you actually ask for,
Yeah.
right? And
Of whom?
well, it's not so much at the learner level, also we're interested in, did you ask for 20 or 1?
Yeah.
And of the 20 you asked for, how many were completed, how many expired, right? That tells us where the issue is. For
Yeah.
faculty, same thing. But when you're using that for the purpose it's meant to be used for, that's all the information you need.
One thing we're finding though is they're cherry picking their evaluators, right?
And that-
So if you can look at,
That's why
They're
it'd be
requesting a-
good to get like something that'll have for each faculty 2 columns, right? The number that they have outstanding, the number they've completed.
Requested.
Because if they're being cherry picked, right, the people who are completing a
have
lot, we'll be able to
200.
tell.
they would have more.
People who are completing
Yeah.
a lot versus then, right? So we'll be able to tell that at a glance, just by looking at it.
And then the question is why? Is it because learners see them as easier evaluators?
Yeah.
Or is it because they actually refuse to do them?
Or they're just simply more accessible.
Well,
That
in
is-
surgery, they're all accessible. I mean, I understand the different specialties, how you work with residents, but our residents work with us continuously every day for 2 blocks or 3 blocks. So accessibility is not the issue. The issue is really
Willingness to do it.
willingness. But
I
again,
was thinking that.
various programs will have different, as long as we can create the report.
And if you're ever questioning anything or you can't, you're wondering if there's some type of report, I mean, we may not always have it, but in whatever way we can get you the information,
Yeah.
we will. So you can just always email medsis@mcmaster.ca for any questions about
But there
anything.
is an email to the PAs how to do this.
Yes. And it just just went out within the last week or so.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So the statuses over here on the right-hand side, there's a few different statuses. All of the EPAs and stages are gonna start as pending, and then once the forms begin getting triggered and completed and they're kind of achieving these things, it will move to in progress. Once they receive 100% on their EPA, the status will change to ready to review, and that's just letting the committee know that according to the Royal College and their minimum requirements, this EPA looks like it's ready for the committee to review and decide if this EPA is achieved. An EPA is only manually marked achieved, so if it does say 100%, but the committee is not satisfied with that and wants the resident to do more work around that, they don't have to mark it achieved. On the flip side, if you see a resident who's at 75%, but looking at other assessment forms, or you know that they're not going to see this many of this in this particular setting, then you can mark something achieved. It is a two-step approval, so the process should be that the competence committee is making decisions as to which EPAs are achieved, and then that is supposed to be ratified at the RPC, and then that's when an EPA is marked approved. So it's a two-step process in the system, and you would just need to decide amongst your program like who will be responsible for that. Some folks, have their meetings, make their notes, write everything down, and the program administrator is actually the one doing the clicking. Some programs have said we want our faculty sitting around a table, they've got things projected on the screen, and as these decisions are happening, they're going to be doing the clicking right within the meeting. So,
Is anybody really doing that process twice at competency committee and then at RPC?
Like marking achieved and marking.
Yeah, going through it.
They're not going through it. So basically from what I've heard is they push the decisions forward, and then the RPC is saying like, okay, good to go, or is there a particular trainee that we need to discuss further? There are some other buttons in here that you can click. So on each of the EPAs, there's a little info button, and it's gonna bring up all of the key features and other information that you need to know about the EPA, because you can see only the short name of the EPA is showing up in the dashboard. Anytime a status is changed, there's a history log, so you can see who and when updated a status on somebody. And then there's also the ability to create additional requirements on your training. So if you do decide, you did this one appendix, which is great, and you got a 5 out of 5, but you did 9 other ones and got a 2 out of a 5, then we might need to see a couple more of those. You can add individual requirements for a trainee. And so if they are at 100%, but then you do look at it and feel like they need to do more work, you add this requirement, you say, you need to do like 2 more gallbladders or whatever. If you add it in, it will default to 0%, and the overall EPA percentage will roll back, taking that new requirement into consideration.
So it can't be marked as a partial include for the EPA, as we discussed before.
Right.
It's a start over.
It's not a start over. Once you add it, it's this percentage is based on what these requirements are. So if they were all at 100 and this was 100, but now you add something in that's 0, this is going to move back to 80% or whatever it should be at.
So the left column will go backwards.
So we talked before about reassigning milestones.
Yep. And you can do that in here as well. It doesn't work that great to reassign all of the milestones. In general, if you see an EPA that has several assessments done and the milestones are not being assessed, then the approach would more so be we need to get these milestones assessed. However, if there are a couple of milestones that either have not been assessed at all, or they are kind of struggling with these couple of milestones, you can add those milestones as a requirement and say, listen, before we're willing to mark this EPA achieved, there's these 2 milestones that we need to see assessed, better.
And it stays pending.
Yeah.
Good.
I know we're getting short on time.
So just on that, what we'll see on the dashboard is just a requirements added. Where would that requirement actually show?
It will show in the dashboard, so you can see under program assessment are all of the ones that I've input, and then under individual assessment, so for this person, it says, it's blurry, but I can't read it, but this requirement right here was added as an individual assessment, and this one, boot camp something or other, was added as an individual assessment.
So it wouldn't be on the same line as the previous, it's a additional.
Becomes its own requirement.
But how does that then change the appendix overall?
It will stay, because they already did it, and they already got one, which is great, but now we've decided as a committee, you need to do more. We're not adding it to this level, we're adding it as a separate, this is just for you, and you need to do 2 more of them.
So.
Because the requirement could be anything, right?
I got that. But let's say, okay, so now they've got to do, let's say they have to do 3, we add 1 more.
Mm-hmm.
So now the 3 only make up 75%. Where that 3 appendixes isn't going to change, that's going to stay 100%.
It's going to stay the same, yeah. So if they have 3 here and 1 here, 3 of them will, they will have got 100% on their 3. We've added another one, and that will be 0%.
And once they complete it, so it's not like the original goes back to a new proportion of the global.
Right.
It's each one is, when you add it, it's an individual thing.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the way the percentages work is that you're adding up each requirement percentage, so this plus this plus this all the way up, divided by number of requirements is where you're getting the EPA percentage from.
It's just that one that changes.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So on the learner, when they go
individuals,
to trigger to get that extra,
got it.
it's gonna populate for them as showing that it's pending, right?
No, so like the requirements don't show on the phone when they trigger the form in the drop down.
Okay.
They're gonna say that they're picking an appendix to do or a gallbladder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't know what the
Because
language.
they can do as many as they want, just because it says do 1, they can do 15.
Yeah.
So the nothing changes like in terms of triggering the form. It's just when the form is
I
completed
got
where
it.
it's
I'm
going.
just trying to understand how I see it in the dashboard.
Yeah. Okay, I don't want to take up too much more time. At the top here, you can see tabs for supporting documentation and reflection documentation. These are just document repositories, and so you can upload as much or as little as you want. So typically programs have some type of resident file, like on a computer or on a drive somewhere, and they keep all these extra, you got this filled out, or you did a rounds presentation, and I watched you do this, so I filled out this form. Those can be all uploaded to this supporting documentation so that when your competence committee is going to look, they have like a global understanding of the trainee.
So if we had IDers, we could put them in there?
No, the IDers will already be pulled in under this other assessments tab. All of the assessments that are completed in MedSIS will all be pulled in under that
So
tab.
anything we put into MedSIS will be under others?
Yeah, but this would be like, there's EPAs that say, you have to do a 1-page report on such and such and such. And so the resident can do that 1-page report, upload it to supporting documentation so that that is
Like
complete.
scan it in and upload it?
Yeah.
So like trainees and the program administrators, we can basically upload anything we want
Exactly.
into MedSIS to be part of their dashboard.
Yeah,
So some budget people.
so you can
Yeah,
see
then we don't need
here.
the math.
Is there any kind of like gigabyte limit?
No, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we say don't upload like videos, but
No.
We may want them.
you may, yeah.
Right, we
What
won't.
we've been
We
told by
won't.
our programmers, the space
That
is
actually, yes,
endless, but.
Yeah, if it's all in one
If
place.
it's all in one place,
Always,
that's a lot
not going back.
But folks are putting like their CARMS files up here, if they have like a boot camp that they run and there's things that they do in this boot camp, when residents first start, they're putting up those, or like OSCE performance and, all types of things
that's really
are all
awesome.
being uploaded in here.
I only use this
Huh?
I only use this Mac drive.
This didn't exist, right? Those, that,
Is this
Part
new,
is
like
new,
to be
the-
able to have a place to
the
upload
upload.
stuff?
No, it's there, it's been there.
it's always been there?
You guys might know, she uses Mac drive. Anyways, okay.
Probably because that was created when we had main port,
Yeah.
you couldn't do it in main port, right?
And then again,
Machine
under
that
other
created.
assessments is where you're going to see IDers, and whatever other assessment forms that you use in MedSIS will get pulled in.
So the daily assessments, this is another
That
enhancement.
residents can upload it themselves too. Remember, that's
It's it would be a WBA,
Scan
so it would show up in there the
themselves,
same way.
So that takes that one.
Yeah.
Katie, you have to scan them all.
Absolutely.
They can just do it.
And the call logs?
Procedure log, yeah, activity log?
Yeah.
Yep, shows
Yeah,
up in
the
there.
activity log as you designed it, I mean, we're gonna be discussing a very specific procedure log for operative procedures, which are totally different than the procedures you've created for in the generic sets, right?
Yeah, so the procedures themselves, or the name of the procedure, we get from the program. So every program has their own specific set of procedures.
But for operative procedures where we've got 300.
Yep, which
And we need other information, right? So that suite of 9 that were created for non-CBD in MedSIS, right? So maybe show us the MedSIS procedure
It's Form 2.
form. Yeah, so that doesn't work for
no,
us.
it's its own form that was there like prior to like CBD, like it's just a procedure log. And so the initial
Yeah.
design when when MedSIS came about a couple of years ago it's all it is a blank form
Yeah,
that they
so-
identify the procedure, it's assessed, and there's a comment box.
Right.
There's no milestones,
Yeah,
and you
so-
can't
so-
have your own.
Yeah, but that's different than a surgical procedure log, which is a Royal College accreditation standard.
Yeah.
That is something completely different. We would see it as a separate form within MedSIS.
That's what plastics is asking for.
Yeah, so
all
what
the
we're,
surgeons,
Same thing,
I'm
yeah.
asking, all the surgical programs need it.
Yeah.
And we have a choice, either we do it and get MedSIS to create it for us, and it's us agreeing on what the boxes are. We've all agreed on one O-score. Instead, we all had different versions of the O-score.
Well, that's
We've all agreed on one for surgery. I'm the bearer of the good news for you.
Good.
But creating a procedure log would be a separate document.
yeah, so what we're going to do is enhance the current procedure log so that each program can have their own procedures, their own forms, so that, whatever your specific procedure or operative form looks like.
It doesn't have an evaluation attached to it.
Right, so basically there's 2 ways that we have it set up.
It's a
is it
simple
can-
accounting tool, right?
Yeah, so right now it works as either a straight log or you can have it assessed.
Yeah, so what we would want is procedure, we need date, we need faculty,
Yeah.
we need,
It will have like rotation, location of rotation, it will have all the typical
we don't
details.
need those.
Well, it would be, it would be a system-wide enhancement, so all
Well,
programs would be
But
using
all I'm
it.
saying is surgical programs have a different need. The use of this tool is for something completely different than, it's not even an evaluation tool. It can be used as part of sorting that out, but I'll go through that with you tomorrow.
So in the.
Sorry, I'm
But
still on
every
my
form
meeting,
in
I'll call you back
MedSIS,
shortly.
Every form that exists in MedSIS would have like the trainee's name, the date of the assessment, like every form that
So this
exists.
is not an assessment form, that's what the point is.
Or whenever
Any
the,
form.
any
So
form
the
that's
activity
in there.
form, we were gonna try to use in the interim until we could get to the call log in September, October. Right? So this sounds like
Yeah.
Bruce has got priority.
Well,
Work it out tomorrow.
this is a totally different issue, and this
Yeah.
is something we'll talk about tomorrow. It's
Yeah.
not an assessment form, it's not for the purposes of this, we need an
Tracking.
electronic tracking system that we can audit for purposes of determining somebody is ready, has covered all the areas or has made progress in the roles.
Yeah.
It's not strictly an evaluation tool.
Right.
Right, it's simply an accounting log, and so we'd like to have it in MedSIS
Yeah.
rather than go and get something non-MedSIS and have to run a
It
different
will,
system
it will
for
be in MedSIS. We're hoping to develop in the fall.
Yeah, but what you're talking about developing isn't what we need. You're talking about something else, and I know what that is.
Yeah, so the tool that we will develop will be flexible enough to accommodate what you're asking for and also what other programs are asking for. So it will be configurable and flexible. So if your program is only using it for logging, the resident logging their procedures, then that's what you would use it for. And if another program wanted those procedures to be assessed, like obstetrics and gynecology, they would use it as an assessment tool. So it would work in both ways. And then basically when we make these large
So you turn the
enhancements,
fields on and off then?
yeah,
We don't have to go into
yeah,
that.
I mean,
We'll get to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'd have to meet
We'll
with the
explain
programs and things like that
We'll
before
explain
we
it
make
to
an
you when we meet
enhancement
with
like
you in
that.
person and see,
Yeah.
because that's a critical issue for us.
I wanna put the request in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well,
we'll do that
we're
after
meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's due to come in September, or October.
We're launching. Some of us are already launched in September.
So what do you do right now?
We have an offline system and we want to put it into MedSIS
Yeah,
and make
so
it
could
accessible.
you use that until we develop?
We could, but it's less than ideal. We have a need to change and standardize, and so we don't want to do it twice, but if we have to do it twice, we'll do it twice.
And then we have time to meet with you, figure out your exact program requirements, write up a document and create the mock screens and things like that. So that way when our programmers develop something, we're getting back something exactly what has been asked of us.
The idea of filling in a form for each operation a person participates in is probably very challenging, but maybe has merit. We'll think about that. Okay.
So this is the learner summary report, and you can pick and choose what you want to appear in this report. And so for this particular person, I'm going to say, show me your stage 1 EPAs, show me your non-CBME forms, your attendance at academic sessions, and your completion of your clinical faculty evaluations. And what you're going to get is just that. It's going to show you a summary of each of the EPAs. It's kind of pulling in some bits and pieces from the dashboard. It's showing you the milestones, how they were assessed, and a collation of the comments for that particular EPA. And it's going to run through every EPA within the stage and show you that data. And then when you get further down, you're going to see the report will pull in the ITERs as well and the WBAs. The one downside to this is that right now it's only pulling in the overall scale on the ITER. And so every ITER in MedSIS has this overall competence scale, and that's the only thing that it's pulling in right now. So we are going to enhance it so programs can have a little bit more flexibility to say, okay, I know this resident is progressing, well, and we don't need to delve into every single question. Give me a high-level report. Or if there's a resident that you need to kind of unpack or dissect a little bit more, and you actually want to see every question on every form and pick out where the issues are, you'll have like a more detailed report that you'll be able to run and give to other folks to be able to review.
More importantly, we'll be able to access the individual items, which is probably more useful for that.
If you want to read them one by one,
yeah. There aren't that many, so as the competency committee reviewer is doing that, they're going to read the individual items.
But if it could all be in one report that you give the competence committee, instead of them like clicking opening each form or something like that, it would just be in one document. So it's just a way of looking at information in multiple places, and whichever is easier. We have some folks that don't want to look at the dashboard, and so the admins are, downloading this and emailing it.
Question is this report better than the report we've created?
Like the dashboard? No, I've looked at it.
This report.
I know, so I've looked at this. It's not bad. This is what I was asking about. We've got other components on there. That's not just this. So if we're going to need a report anyways to summarize everything, we might as well have our own. I think this is useful for like a reviewer to generate, and they can get a lot of information they need to, although it doesn't have all of the contextual stuff. This is what I was talking about, like at least to observe, like that's not captured on this form, right?
So another thing that we're gonna do with the flexibility of the report is to show for a particular EPA, like each individual form that was completed. And in that instance, you would be able to see more details within the form.
Like including the contextual stuff.
Yeah.
So like that would sort of be useful, but I think because we have so many other components, we still need our own.
We're still going to have our own.
We still need our own.
We're still having.
I think most programs probably have that, like their own kind of file review.
Other things that they look at.
Competency committee report that includes stuff that is going to be in MedSIS.
Yeah.
But no, this is something
even though we'll be able to upload them into MedSIS, anything we put in that document, the repository, you're not going to add all those things into the summary report, right?
Right.
If we put
It will only be assessments done in
MedSIS. Right.
And then adding functionality of being able to pull up by date, right?
By a certain
schedule.
time
So from
period.
last
Right,
competency committee to current competency committee.
Which is
so
not
we're
in there right
getting
now.
everything.
It pulls up
Right, you get everything right now.
report from like beginning of time, basically.
Only collate stuff
Right.
completed in MedSIS. So it won't fully meet the needs.
And then at the bottom here, you can see for programs that are using the procedure log, it would list all of the procedures, and if it's a log, it will just show a log, and if they're being assessed, it would show the breakdown of their assessment.
So if there's 3,000 procedures, it can do that.
Yeah, I mean, you have a very long report, but yes. Your event attendance, so for programs using the event manager, it's going to show you which sessions they were present at and which sessions they were absent from. And then it's going to show you their completion of clinical teaching faculty evaluation. So you'll be able to see, they've been sent 20 forms and they've only completed 2. So you'll be able to kind of see if they're keeping up on their forms.
Are they able to filter procedure logs in any way by time, or
They
are they gonna get the whole composite of them every time in a learner summary? Can they just filter down
Well, if it was
from the
by
last-
time period, if it
Yeah.
was by time period, or, it will depend on how we enhance the activity log when that time comes as to what we want to see in the report. So we make the functionality do all of the things that we want it to do, and then after that we say, okay, from all of that, what do we want it to spit out at the end of the day that is something usable for the program to look at?
So could you say, this is our January CC, we want, for preparing a report for that competency committee, could you say we want the procedure log to reflect procedures of the last 6 months?
Yes.
CC, whatever. Yeah.
Or
by
since
time.
last CC rather than what they've done for 5 years?
Yes, so we don't have that in there right now, but as Lisa was saying, it would be one of our,
That will come,
yeah,
okay.
And do we have that marked for July 1?
no,
But
it's not there for
But
July.
will I still be able to go into that basic file of where those procedures are logged and review the whole thing outside of that report?
Yeah, so what will happen is in the dashboard here, where you saw the tabs along the top,
Yeah.
there'll be one called like activity log or procedure log, whatever it's gonna end up being called. And that will end up being, depending on how we organize the system, are they by category? Are they just a long list of procedures? Are they organized by a certain surgical type or by a body part system or something like that?
Customize it?
It would be configurable in some sense. So it would have like layers to it. So if you had, several breakdowns of something
Yeah, we
with,
said domains, right?
Drill.
Yes.
Head, neck, chest, stomach, small intestine, colon,
exactly.
gallbladder, we could add that into that?
Yeah, and then what you would see is something that's very similar to this dashboard. So you would instead have like your procedures listed and like how many times they've triggered a form and the breakdown of the scores or whatever we decide. And then, do you filter based on time? Do you filter based on procedure? Do you filter based on certain contextual variables that are captured within the form? That sort of thing.
So that's not what we need. Okay.
So what we need from you is to either meet with Lisa, and we'll be meeting with you directly to get the technical specs anyway, and then we would meet with a fair chunk of programs. We would collect what they're currently using and then try to create something that's configurable for all of the programs to make use of, because lots of the EPAs have maintenance of a logbook and things like that need to be submitted. So, and people are doing these either external to MedSIS or in, however they've figured out, they have these homegrown systems and things like that. And the goal is to have everybody doing these things and doing this tracking within MedSIS.
So the other documents that are uploaded where ITERs go, say other things are uploaded
No, not,
there?
ITERs don't go in the supporting documentations.
No,
ITERs are
Others.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anything
Yeah.
that's under other.
other
like ITERs,
assessments.
Yeah, that gets rolled into
The report.
Yeah.
the
Everything
report,
done in
and-
MedSIS.
but what's in supporting documents doesn't.
Right.
Right, got it.
So if the program wants to move to a one-page ITER, you can change that in their program to their preferred form. IDER form.
Yeah, like folks change, we have like 1,200 IDERs in MedSIS.
Yeah.
And so as folks change their IDERs or get new IDERs, they send them to us, we create them, we set up the workflow, like what rotation is this for? You know, like do you need a mid-eval and a final eval? Like, you know, how many days before the end of the rotation? And we create those workflows.
Yeah.
And so whatever your current IDER is, we would just turn off that workflow and start
So
your new
as
one.
we transition and we put will we be able to, if we, you told us good news that we could have all our residents in, whether formally in the CBD or not. The ones not formally in CBD will probably be using the traditional rotation IDERs. It depends, we haven't decided yet. We could keep them and disappear them as that group goes out and we transition, because we're only gonna have one CBD IDER.
Right, so we would make the workflow, your current one is like probably applicable to all trainees, and we would make it only applicable to, you know, your PGY 3, 4, and 5, or whatever it is,
That's
and then we'd
changes.
create a new one that's only applicable for PGY 1s.
Or all future. Okay,
Yeah.
got it, that's good.
Okay, the last thing I just wanted to talk about were the enhancements that are kind of coming up on the horizon. And so we are developing a CBME dashboard for family medicine, and that's in progress, and they're going to be officially launching July 1. The one-step approval or passive acceptance where I can hand my phone over and you can complete the form. We're creating a competence committee review dashboard, and that's something we're just in discussion about now, where another one of those tabs would be specific to a competence committee review, and the program would like create a template of what this review looks like what are all the documents involved, what are all the steps involved, who are the people
He's already designed it. You can have
Like I did last.
who are the folks assigned to each of these things. Then you could either upload templates that are required for them, upload documents, you know, you'd be able to check off when things are complete. And it would be configurable by the program. If each trainee is gonna have 5 reviews, then, you know, you could create these 5 reviews and assign it to all of your residents with the templates in there.
If you want to apply the new